Hello everyone. I'm sitting here in Freiburg, Germany, and I'm cooling my feet in a Bächle. Even back in the Middle Ages, citizens of Freiburg had running water and a refrigerant from mountain water, cool mountain water, running right in front of their homes. Today we're going to be talking about the history of the Energiewende. We don't quite have to go back to the Middle Ages to do that, but we will have to go back a lot further than a lot of people suspect. You see, the Energiewende as a term became known worldwide in 2011, but the term itself is much older. In fact, it was coined around 1980, in the late 1970s, and it was in the title of this book, Energiewende, Growth and Prosperity Without Oil and Uranium. And this book was actually written in Freiburg, and that's why I'm here today. This particular book was written because outside of town here, some citizens came together, actually tens of thousands of them from the area, to block construction of a nuclear plant for the first time ever in the world. It was the first successful attempt to block a nuclear plant anywhere. But in saying no to nuclear, they also realized that they would need to say yes to something else. And their answer was renewables and efficiency. What this book does is basically puts up a scenario where energy consumption will be cut in half. And the rest of the energy consumption, 45% of it is going to be renewable, and 55% would be domestic coal. Now, that is not a scenario we would want to have today. But keep in mind that climate change was just entering public awareness back then in the 1970s, late 1970s and 1980 when this book was published. What the researchers were really focusing on back then was energy security. So they were focusing on a domestic resource, and Germany has a lot of coal. So because this book has Energiewende in its name, some people say that the movement itself started in 1980 with the publication. Now, I'm not so sure about that, because if the energy transition had truly gotten started in 1980, we wouldn't have needed the second Energiewende book from 1985. This one is entitled The Energiewende is Possible, and it was published in 1985, and it basically investigates why nothing had happened in those 5 years from 1980 to 85. Now, of the two books, this one is really my favorite, and it's not just because I'm personal friends with one of the authors. This book really sketches out what the political barriers are. So it's not really talking about a scenario anymore about how much energy we would need from what. It's talking about the policy changes that need to be made. One of the things that they found was that the market itself is going to have to change to promote renewables and efficiency. One of the main problems is that incumbent utilities have assets, conventional energy assets, and those assets would be hurt by this transition. And so what we need is new players, new companies, startups, to drive innovation and promote the transition. This finding is really relevant even today, more than 30 years after the book was published, because a lot of countries are trying to get their utilities to implement renewables for society. And this book really says that that's not the way to go. And actually, what Germany did was also step up the transition with new startups, not with the incumbent utilities. And so both this analysis and German experience would suggest that the incumbent utilities might not be the ones we want to have in the driver's seat for the transition. They've got too much to lose in terms of old assets. So it took another 5 years or so for something to happen. So it was in 1990 that a law was passed, the Feed-in Act, that finally gave an incentive to new players to start generating renewable electricity. And the policy mechanism, it was called feed-in tariffs. It did basically two things. First, it guaranteed these generators that they could sell their electricity to the grid, even if the utilities didn't want it. And let's face it, they didn't want any of it. And that's the technical term for that is called priority grid access or priority dispatch. So these feed-in tariffs were floor prices, minimum prices that the utilities had to pay for this electricity, even if they didn't want it. And it's funny because in 2007, former President, U.S. President Al Gore, told a Senate committee essentially that we needed German-style feed-in tariffs. What he said was, if the utility sets the price, it'll never get off the ground.
But if it's a tariff, if it's regulated, we ought to have a law that allows homeowners and small business people to sell that electricity into the grid without any artificial caps. Then you might never need another central station generating plant. Let people sell it.
And as you can see from this chart, going back to 1990, throughout the 90s, renewable energy production grew. It started off basically with just traditional hydropower, but we added some onshore wind power throughout the 90s. So onshore wind benefited the most from this law that went into effect in 1991. So this law remained in effect until 2000, and in 2000 a new law was passed. It's called the Renewable Energy Act, or the EEG in German, and it changed one basic thing. Basically, the feed-in tariffs from the 1990s had been pegged to the retail rate. As of 2000, they were no longer pegged to that. They were basically different for every type of technology, and even some distinctions were made in system sizes. As you can see from the chart, whereas wind power was the main benefactor in the 90s, really solar and biomass kicked in a few years after the law went into effect. So we suddenly had everything growing at once because the right amount of money was being paid for each technology. Wind had done so well in the 90s because it was cheapest, and so the policy essentially gave the most support to the technology that needed it the least. The goal of the 2000 EEG was to give each technology exactly the support level it needed. The 2000 EEG basically started the global energy transition that we have today. If Germany hadn't passed this law, the manufacturing capacity would not have been set up worldwide for wind or solar probably. Eventually it might have been, but we wouldn't be where we are today. Nonetheless, some people have argued that feed-in tariffs were a bad idea because they overpaid. Actually, they only overpaid solar for a couple of years. Wind and biomass were not really overpaid. What happened was the lawmakers had sat down with industry experts in trying to decide how high the feed-in tariffs for solar should be. And they basically did not see the price plummet coming. And this was a failure not just of the policymakers, but really also of the industry itself. In fact, if you go back and look at all the experts, what they were saying around 2005, no one thought we were going to be where we are today. And so it's a bit unfair to say that feed-in tariffs overpaid solar when in fact they kind of kicked off a revolution that made the solar sector more successful globally than it would have been without this policy. So while some people argue that the Energiewende started in 1980 with the first book, or maybe in 1990 or 91 with the Feed-in Act, or maybe in 2000 with the Renewable Energy Act, one thing is clear: it didn't start in 2011. What happened in 2011 was that the last doubters among Germany's main politicians finally got on board.